Well, good evening from Fairfax, Virginia. That's where I happen to be staying. Got into here yesterday, which was the last day of my touring rally. Uh, it ended with a group picture at the Iwo Jima Memorial, just adjacent to the Arlington Cemetery, and I finished out yesterday at Arlington Cemetery visiting the Tomb of the Unknowns and watching a couple of guard changes. And then I spent some time up at the Arlington House. That was Robert E. Lee's wife's house that they abandoned early in the Civil War because Robert E. Lee chose to side with his family, his state, and his people, and that put him on a collision course with the Union, of course. And the Union confiscated that Arlington house and turned its properties into a national cemetery that we have today. Uh, that's how I spent yesterday. And now today I had a tour of Washington, D.C., spent most of the day doing that. So that brings us here to our last lesson in our quarterly. We've had two sessions of 6 lessons each. We started out with It's All About Jesus and then Being an Authentic Church. Today we have a special focus on the joy of giving, and I don't know why they call this a special focus because uh, I consider giving as a very necessary part of being an authentic church. We didn't really have anything pointed to what we should be doing with what God has blessed us with when we studied being an authentic church. But I think this continues that concept of being an authentic church is giving, because after all, didn't our God give to us when we were very much in need, when we could not meet our need? We did not have the resources nor the ability to solve our problem with Him, the problem that we have created because we have walked away from God. God has not walked away from us. So we're looking at a Paul letter. He wrote it to the church in Corinth. Uh, which is in what we call Greece today, but they were calling it Acacia uh, in Paul's day. So he's writing to that church. Remember now, he's on his second missionary journey. It was Corinth where he stayed approximately 15 years as he, on his second missionary journey, was directed to move from Asia Minor over to what we see as Europe now. He started in Macedonia, came on down north along the Aegean Sea, went to Athens, uh, got things crosswise in Athens so that he had to flee. Uh, Ooh, that doesn't work at all, does it? No, there, now then, that works much better. Trying to get the lights off my glasses. Reflection is bothering me. It's got to be annoying to you, but anyway. So Paul's writing to the church at Corinth where he spent a lot of time, but that church seemed to need a lot of time, a lot of his time. He wrote one letter to them already and found out from his runners that he needed to write yet a second letter because of the problems that they were having. So here in 2 Corinthians, we're all the way well deep into this letter in chapter 9. We're going to look at giving, uh, giving generously as a part of uh, being an authentic church, because our God, in being authentic with us, has given to us way more, way more than we deserve. So here Paul is writing, and he says, "Remember this." He starts in our section. He uses an agricultural uh, an agricultural lesson. He says, "Whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously." So here, Paul is using the farmer as an example in referring to us in our generosity. Are we going to be stingy, or are we going to be generous? Generous with what God has freely given us? Or are we going to be stingy and keep it for ourselves and thus not being a part of God's ministry? You know, God gives to us materially uh, to meet our needs, and many times to meet the needs of others. Uh, those that have an obligation to help those who don't. And so here, what Paul is saying, if there is to be an abundant crop harvest, there has to be a generous and abundant sowing. If there is meager sowing, then the crop will be meager. The seed needs to be spread in order to um, produce a great return at harvest time. So, this is how he starts out with the concept of generosity. Generosity is what fuels God's economy. He is generous with us because all things are His, and He gives them to us, and we have the stewardship to use them as He desires us to use them. Now, one thing Paul wanted to stress, if you take and pay attention to how he phrases things, he is not compelling people or requiring people to give. He's not saying do it, because here in the 7th verse he says each person should do as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly. See, that's that stinginess and a meager harvest, not reluctantly or out of compulsion. See, that's what Paul didn't want to do. He didn't, while he wanted to be firm in his concept that generosity is required for the believer, he didn't want to convey a message that giving is compulsory. He wants each believer to have as an essential part of their life a sense of giving. God wants you to feel or to uh, realize He has given to you, and as He has given to you, you are to give to others. Um, Now, one of the things that is not mentioned in this lesson, uh, the phrase tithing is not mentioned, but that, of course, comes to our minds for us to give in our giving. One of the major concepts is the tithe. That's something that concerns us, but this is a giving of everything, not just money. Um, this is generosity in any resource that we might have, whether it's our time, whether it's the food in our cabinets, whether it's tools in our workshop, could be money in our accounts or in our pocket. This is about generosity. So he says um, that it should come uh, from our heart. In other words, we should feel of our own thankfulness to God. We should feel uh, that we should also give, not under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. What's your attitude? Are you giving because somebody said legalistically the tithe is required? Or are you giving because you're glad that God has provided for you to the point that you can provide for others? How do the funds for running our church? How are they? How are they supplied? The church has nothing of its own uh, unless we give. The assets, the resources that First Baptist Church Palatka has is based. I'm looking here. I got to get back to a screen. Oh, I need Alt Tab. Uh, is based in what we give, what we provide. Uh, but First Baptist Church Palatka has nothing. Uh, our pastor and the rest of the staff, as well as the bills, are met because of God's generosity to us, and we joyfully give because we want to be able to meet together as believers. We want to hear the word taught. Uh, we want to fellowship with like minded and like believing people. And those that are serving the church uh, are looking to us for their support. They're not working out in the world like or at other jobs like we might have. Um, they're dedicating their time and their energies to you and to me. And we need to realize that they're generously giving their time and energies to us. That we joyfully must and generously should be giving of our resources. They're not ours. The resources we have are not ours. Oh, you say, well, but I've earned them. I went to work 40 hours a week, uh, week after week, 52 weeks out of the year. Maybe I took a couple of weeks for vacation, but I worked for my money. Yeah, but just stop and think. Where'd that ability to work come from? Where did that opportunity to have that job come from? You didn't build it. You didn't make it. You didn't provide it. The fact that you and I have one coherent thought in our brains up here is because God has given us that ability. Whether we're engineers, whether we've run boilers uh, at the paper mill, whether we've operated on paper machines, the ability to think, to reason, to understand these processes and what's required in that job, all of that God has given us. Uh, we are totally nothing without God. So you did not provide your wages, even though your time was spent at a job. Even that job, the opportunity to have that job, to be employed at that job, God made the way. God made the way to have that job. And we ought to be thanking God for the job, for the time that we could spend at the job to earn a living, for the strength to go in each day, for the determination and discipline to go in each day. Uh, God has freely given all this to us, even though we think it is of our own making and our own doing, it is not. So, since God is generous with us, God expects us to be generous and to be cheerful about it. Uh, God is not resentful that He gives us what we need, uh, because our biggest need, it's not housing, it's not transportation, it's not clothing on our back, and it's not food in our bellies. Our greatest need is to be redeemed, bought back out of our rebellion to God. We've rebelled against Him. We've walked away from Him. He hadn't walked away from us. He hasn't moved. He's chased after us. And He's done that because that's what He wants. That's who He is. He loves us. He cares for us. He's committed to our well being. And He knows our well being is best met in His presence. Living life the way He designed it to be lived, not with us saying, well, God, I can handle this mostly on my own, but when I get in a sticky mess, uh, I'll give you a call. And then maybe I'll see how you'll work it out. That's not the attitude God wanted with Adam or with us. God wants us to be 100% with Him. Life is not what we make of it, it's what God leads us into making life about. So here, uh, looking there in verse 9, yes, I skipped a few verses. Looking there in verse 9, look at what Paul referenced out of his Bible of the day. What was his Bible of the day? Well, it was the 5 books, the Pentateuch of Moses. It was the wisdom literature. It was the prophets. And so, out of the wisdom literature, Paul makes a reference here to one of the Psalms. I believe it's Psalm 112. And he says, as it is written. He's referring to his scriptures right there. And if anybody knew the scriptures, that was Paul. He was a Hebrew, remember? He went to school, Hebrew school, rabbi school, and one of the best teachers of his day is where he went. So he knew his scriptures. As it is written, now who's the he there? Well, that's God. He distributed freely. He gave to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. There's the clue that it's God. Our righteousness doesn't endure forever. We have no right standing with God except that God has given us a right standing with Him. He and He alone has righteousness and has never, and it has always endured. So this is what God does. He distributed freely, and He gave to the poor. His righteousness endures forever. It's not going to fail. It's never going away, and it's never going to be something that is lost. It will always be there. In our next sections, uh, verses 10 and 11. Let's take a look at verses 10 and 11. Let me get them up here. Now he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way so that you can be generous on every occasion. See, there's the clue. We are enriched not just to have a fat bank account. We are enriched so that we have the resources that we can be generous on every occasion that arises, that there are people in need or occasions of need. We have because we give, and we have given on every occasion. And through us, your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. Now, here Paul is talking about a collection he's taken up throughout the Gentile world. The church in Jerusalem had a lot of financial need, a lot of uh, they had a communal relationship where all good, where all resources were pooled, and the needs of the church were met out of those pooled resources. And those pooled resources dwindled and were not. Uh, they could have been better, and so Paul came up, or God gave Paul the idea to take up a collection from these Gentile churches over in what we call Europe. Remember, he went from Asia Minor over to Macedonia. And when he did, the churches that were established were mostly Gentile, and through the Gentiles giving to meet the needs of the Jerusalem church, Paul was hoping that the Gentiles and the Jews would come together. The Jewish believers would come together and accept the Gentile believers, because up until that time there were the Jews, and then there were the rest, and the rest didn't count. The rest of the entire world didn't count as far as the Jews were concerned. And even though they believed in Jesus Christ, and even though Jesus told them to go to the other ends of the world to take the good news, the Jewish believers were still having a time accepting Gentiles, because for all of their lives, they had the attitude that it's us and then all the rest of the others that don't count, the Gentiles, the sinners. Uh, so here, Paul is saying that your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. The thanksgiving will come from the church in Jerusalem, and they will see that this gift to them to provide for their needs has come from God Himself. God has moved the Gentile believers such that they will give to meet the needs of the uh, Jewish believers. So here, uh, Paul also there in verse 10 says that he who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food. Now, who's that he? The he who will also supply and increase your store. Well, that's God. God's the one who's watching over you. God is the one making opportunities uh, and increasing your supply so that your store of seed will increase, so that you will have more to sow and enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. Now, see, he's speaking, even though he's talking about seed and sowing and harvesting, he's using those now to stress a spiritual concept, because now then it's a harvest of not wheat, not barley, but righteousness, right standing with God. We don't earn our righteousness from God, but we gain God's righteousness when we uh, live according to the way He would have us to live. And being generous is one of the precepts. Now, Paul deals here in verses 12 through 15, which closes us out. He's dealing here with um, with this collection that he is asking the Corinthians to take up, so that when he comes, it will be a part of, they'll be ready. They won't have to scramble and, we got to take up a collection. Paul's here, let's take it up. They're to take it up ahead of time. This service that you perform, the service of generosity, the service of sharing what the Corinthians have with the Jerusalem church, is not only supplying the needs of God's people, that's first, maybe and foremost, and the most obvious thing that it supplies is that it's supplying the needs of God's people in Jerusalem, but is overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God. Remember, God doesn't do things to make us look good. He does what he does to make himself known and to give cause to the believers to be thankful to him. God gets some credit. He simply works through us and in us to do his good will for those in need. And it is important, while maybe they may thank us, we may be thanked for our giving, it is really God that we should see as supplying the need through others, and they're being faithful in their belief to God. Because of the service by which you have proved yourselves, others will praise God for the obedience that accompanies your confession of the gospel of Christ. See, so giving is also an expression of our belief, a witness, if you will. We give because God gave. So we're witnessing to God's generosity, to the good news. Um, and for your generosity in sharing with them and with everyone else. So specifically, the generosity of giving for this collection was to go to the Jerusalem church, but not only that, but with everyone else that was also in need. Uh, Paul ends this section, but is with the doxology, thanks, or this praise, thanks be to God for his indescribable gift. Now, the Corinthians were making a collection to have a gift to give to the believers in Jerusalem. Here, the great giver, God himself, is being praised by Paul for his indescribable gift. And what is that indescribable gift? That's the good news, that we can be redeemed. We can be bought out of our rebellion. It can be overcome by Christ's life and teaching and death and resurrection. That's his indescribable gift, Jesus Christ, his Son, our Savior, the one who has redeemed us out of all of our unrighteousness and rebellion against God. And here in the end, when he speaks of giving and making gifts to others, he looks back and sees the greatest gift from the greatest giver, God himself, and realizes and calls the gift that God has given us as indescribable. And Jesus' sacrifice becomes indescribable when we really realize, if left to our own resources, there's no way we could be called God's children. There's no way we could have a house, we could have a mansion, that Jesus would go and prepare a room for us, that when I come, we will have a place in God's family. That's what's being conveyed about by Jesus when he says, I go to prepare a place for you. It's indescribable. And I think that's what we're going to recognize when we pass to the other side, when we pass to the next realm of our existence, and we see God face to face, and we know who He is, and we know exactly uh, what He's about, and that He knows us, and that in spite of who we have been, He Himself still loves us. This is quite a piece I see here of being an authentic church. We can't be authentic about the gospel if we don't give, if we're not generous in giving our time, resources that we have, whether they be money, whether there be other objects and tools, um, even our talents. That which God has given us, He's given it to us to serve, to build up, as we have seen, build up the church of Jesus Christ, that we as saints might grow and continue to witness. This this is a strong message, I think, to us. Uh, a little bit more broadly based than just the tithe. The tithe is part of our generosity. But generosity encompasses so much more than just the tithe. Generosity encompasses our whole life in Jesus Christ. Well, I hope this has been something God can use in your life to help you see how He might be leading you in your generosity, and what He wants to accomplish in your life, to be able to aid and support others that are in need as believers. Uh, Now, next Sunday, which will be in June, I don't have the calendar for me. I think it's June 2nd, isn't it? Yeah, that would be right. That is June 2nd. I'll be with you, and we'll begin a new quarterly. Now, I place new quarterlies in our classroom. I don't know if you've been gathering in the classroom at class time, but if this Sunday, or maybe this coming Wednesday, go by the classroom, get your new quarterly, and we'll be doing lesson one out of that quarterly. I have a copy of it. This is the cover. It's not showing up too good, is it? Okay, so that's what we're having for a quarterly for our next studies, and on June 2nd, we're promising promises we can count on, and we're going to look at God's promise of fruitfulness. So we'll begin this 12 lessons, or this 13 lessons out of our new quarterly. Make sure it says summer 2024 senior adults. That's what you want to look for, is summer 2024 senior adults. This happens to be the leader guide. And you'll be able to, boy, that just doesn't work out too well, does it? Anyway, that will be our material for next semester. We'll see you next Sunday. I'll be home Saturday week. I'll be back in Palatka. I've got a couple of more days here in Washington, D.C., and then it'll take me 5 days to get home, not because of the distance. What do you mean 5 days? All you got to do is get on I-95 and pedal to the metal and cover 400 or 500 miles a day, and it might take you 3 days at most. Well, I'm going a long and winding road. I've got a few places I want to hit before I get home. Uh, and so I'll be home on Saturday next, uh, and then we'll get together on June 2nd. See you then, and God bless this coming week.